This video is going to be all about me. I thought I might as well give you a little bit of a background to me, where I'm coming from and what my experience and relationship with Tai Chi is. And I thought that might be useful given if you're watching my videos on YouTube, or if you're coming to my classes or want to come to my classes, it might be helpful to know who I am essentially, or a little bit more about who I am. So my journey into Tai Chi started a little bit over 20 years ago. And I suppose for me, it was the silver lining out of a very dark cloud, shall we say the least. So I started Tai Chi just after becoming incapacitated by a very curious illness. I had had something a little while before that. I don't even know how to explain it. It was a little bit like a virus. I had some funny stuff going on. I felt unwell for a while and then just didn't recover. And my experiences in the world were just absolutely awful. So, you know, walking from home to a train station, I felt like I was walking on soft, sort of gooey, spongy ground. I would be getting headaches. I wasn't able to think properly. I was feeling absolutely exhausted at the end of my days at work. And I couldn't figure out why, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, at the time, I was working in quite a high pressurized environment. So I was working at a senior level in one of the world's largest professional services firms. And so I suppose day-to-day life was pretty relentless, really. And it got to the point where I was just so exhausted and so incapable of functioning, I got signed off from work by the doctor. And that followed a number of assessments by the occupational doctors as well to try to understand what was happening with me. And the doctors were a little bit kind of, I don't know, bemused by it, really. So with all that, it's quite hard talking about this. Because it's sort of trying to make sense of it a long time on. So I'd been signed off work. The doctors didn't have any idea what was going on, essentially. And initially, I think because they didn't have a hook to hang their coat on of diagnosis, they said that I most probably had ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, and that I was stressed because of the high pressure situation and environment I was working in, and that I then needed to see a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, and I needed some tablets. So that was what they said. That was probably one of the darkest times in my life, actually, because I didn't agree with them. I knew that this wasn't what was going on, and so I had to enter into what became a 7-year battle to finally get a diagnosis of what was wrong with me. And that finally transpired to be that I had I still have some issues. It's a balance disorder. So I have a balance disorder that they think was probably caused by a virus that caused some damage to one of my nerves that sends signals to the brain from my inner ear, along with some abnormal eye movements as well, which again they kind of have never really been able to describe properly. Now, the strange thing about this illness, sorry if I digress from my Tai Chi for a little while, it's just I think it's kind of quite a relevant thing to talk about. is that it is an illness that kind of behaves in an opposite way to a lot of other illnesses. And that is that being inactive, resting, lying down, even doing things like working on computers and stuff, actually aggravates the symptoms that I get. So I have to be active. Now, this causes a lot of people confusion, because when you say you're ill and you're fatigued and you haven't got energy for doing stuff, you can't go out and socialise and all that sort of stuff, but then they see you doing activities, people really misunderstand what is going on and they think you're talking nonsense, which is quite unfortunate really. But out of all of this, as I say, I found a Tai Chi class near to my home that I could finally attend. So the doctors, despite not really having a proper diagnosis, just said, yeah, Tai Chi will not do you any harm, go along, do it, because it's only going to do you some good. And it was something that was in line with interest that I'd had for quite some time about Tai Chi, actually. Since I was a teenager was the first time I came across Tai Chi. But I hadn't found a teacher close to me or that I was able to get to for classes and so forth. So this was kind of one of those things where I thought, well, actually, there's some serendipity in this. So I went along and I started Tai Chi. And I have to say, for the first few years, my attendance at Tai Chi was pretty sporadic, because I would have periods of time where I felt too ill. So even attending a class environment with lots of people in the surrounding area, I'll probably do another video on balance disorders at some point to try to describe the perceptual difficulties that you get when you lose your balance. But anyhow, class environments were very difficult because people are moving around you. I'm also trying to maintain my balance and all of that sort of stuff. So it was very, very challenging. However, I persevered. Something about Tai Chi got under my skin. Not only was it the way in which we were learning to move and some of the benefits I was starting to experience in terms of the Tai Chi practice, particularly from my balance, but there was also really the intellectual stuff about the studying of Chinese thought and Chinese philosophy, Chinese medicine, all of those sorts of things that kind of interlink with Tai Chi and are part of it. So if you really want to learn Tai Chi, you've got to engage in learning all of these sorts of principles and things like that. So that was great, but challenging. And so Tai Chi through those years kind of became absolutely central to my survival. And I can't really kind of describe how important it became to me. And that is because what I found is that all of the approaches that I was experiencing, the psychological, about dealing with illness, the psychological about dealing with loss, and you know, because I'd lost my career, I'd lost my life, I'd lost my social life, I'd lost so many different things that, you know, I had to deal with a huge amount of grief during that period of time. But at the same time, I also had to deal with a huge amount of uncertainty, because I didn't know actually what was wrong with me. I was going through a medical system that seemed to be systematically dysfunctional in terms of trying to work my way through and get proper diagnoses. I didn't know what was going to happen to my life. I had no direction and nothing was there for me. So Tai Chi kind of became this absolutely central thing for me. And it helped me in absolutely every single way, from physical, from the mental, from the spiritual, all of those sorts of things. It helped to guide me on my way. And my experiences were so profound through Tai Chi during that period of time that I went on to study a master's degree where I, as part of my research project, my main master's research project, was really looking at one of the central theories in Chinese classical thought, which is often referred to as five-element theory or five-phase theory. But I studied that at depth, in particular relation to psychology. Again, that's another story, but it just made such an impact to me in my life. And so I think over this period of time, Tai Chi has absolutely grown on me. And, you know, some of the aspects which I found that were so important to me were that, for example, you know, we often have this psychology around, you know, when we experience some kind of setback or some kind of hindrance in life or, you know, illness, we treat it or refer to it as some kind of battle, so that we're going to overcome that hardship, we're going to overcome this. The problem with things like a balance disorder is that actually if you try to overcome it, it comes back and hits you. It hits you so hard in multiple different ways that actually you have to learn to not try to overcome it. So in essence, for me, the best experience was actually learning to bend with the wind. There's nothing wrong with learning to bend with the wind, because trees do it all the time, and if they didn't, they'd break and they'd snap and they wouldn't survive. So in many ways, the principles and philosophies underpinning Tai Chi were really, really important in managing my long-term rehabilitation, but at the same time, for me, managing on an ongoing basis my own health and well-being. And again, this is both from a mental perspective and a physical perspective. And it's just been invaluable to me. So, yeah, so for me, I think one of the things that kind of, in my relationship with Tai Chi, is that a number of months ago, probably about 6 or 7 months ago now, I was visited by a PhD student and a professor from a Chinese university who were doing a study of Tai Chi teachers to understand how particularly Tai Chi is taught in the West, but also how we are bringing Chinese culture to Western contexts and so forth. So it was a fascinating conversation around particularly Chinese philosophy and how that is disseminated. And when they kind of got towards the end of the interview, they asked me, what does Tai Chi mean to me and what is Tai Chi to me? I kind of was stumped. I sort of sat back and I thought, I don't see a distinction between me and Tai Chi. And both the professor and the student said, so Tai Chi is you and you are Tai Chi. And I think that, I don't want to blow my own trumpet here, but that is how I feel. It has become such a part of me that I now, you know, in everything I do, I embody Tai Chi, and yeah, that's what I do. And I'm not sure I can say anything more about that. So there you go. That is kind of, I think that probably covers it. I'm not sure I need to say any more. There you go. So, thank you.